Guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'm going to go over an article titled Drop in U.S. Birth Rate Could Lead to Demographic Time Bomb. And big shout out to Wade for sending me this article. And guys, this whole article and this whole video today is going to be dealing with the subject of basically, guess what? People aren't having kids as much. And guess what? The reason they aren't having kids is because a lot of them aren't getting married as much. But in this article, I'm going to go over first because today I'm going to be going over 3 articles. 2 are small and 1 is a little longer. The first 2 is going to deal with the subject of the dropping or the declining birth rate in 6 years in a row, the declining birth rate here in the United States. And not to mention, it's been happening all around the world for a number of years. But also, the last article I'm going to do is going to be about the declining marriage rate, especially with the youngest generation, Generation Z crowd, how basically they, as well as the millennial crowd, they just simply are not interested in marriage like previous generations. And they go into the reasons why. And I'm doing this, guys, just to, again, show you guys how, as time's going on, more and more people simply aren't getting married. And more people are waking up to realize, like, you know what? It's not really what it's cracked up to be. And it was really interesting as I get later on to the thing about the Generation Z crowd. Generation Z crowd were pretty much the kids who probably grew up with a more single-parent households than ever, probably seeing their parents getting divorced, and they're like, hey, this isn't for us. We don't want to deal with this. And on top of all the knowledge that's being spread out there about what can happen to guys, you know, the negative impact, what can happen to you if you, in fact, get married and get divorced because the family courts are against you, and it's going to be a big, giant mess on top of other things. But first, we're going to deal with the dropping birth rate and dealing with the issues that there's deep concern about, because there's all this concern about how it's going to impact the economy in terms of, like, you're going to have so many people that are seniors that can't work, and they're reliant on the way the system is built up by younger people being there working and all that to help support them, all right? But the problem is that basically people are waiting later in life to have kids, or they're not having kids at all. And what's interesting, guys, is that through this whole thing, the 2 articles I mentioned, they're not going to mention anything about, guess what? People just simply, adults don't want to have kids anymore because they don't want to get married anymore for reasons we know. They're going to have other excuses and reasons there, and it's pretty interesting to see the different ideas. And some are valid, like you're going to see here, and obviously now people are talking about the pandemic. Because of the pandemic, nobody's having any kids. Well, I don't know about you guys, where you live, but where I am, it seems like everybody has been having kids in the last year. And I'm not talking about that women are getting pregnant prior to March of last year. I'm talking about during this time period here. So I don't know what they're talking about, thinking that nobody's, getting it on and having kids during the pandemic, because believe me, people are. But nobody wants to say the obvious, that guess what, guys simply just aren't interested because of the knowledge that's going out there. More guys are just saying, that's it, it's not for me, not happening. But anyhow, I'm going to go through this first article here. This article came out today. This is brand new. So it starts off, birth rates have fallen for the 6th year in a row, and pandemic may be helping that trend along. Bullshit, because guess what, people are breeding like rabbits right now. They're breeding like Catholic rabbits right now. So I don't know what they're talking about there. Says for the 6th year in a row, birth rates in the United States have fallen, and combined with a slowdown in immigration and an increasing number of deaths, it all points to a shifting demographic picture in America. Reports the New York Times. CDC data released Wednesday shows there were 3,605,000 births in 2020, the lowest number since 1979. For the 15 through 44 age gap, there were 55.8% live births per 1,000 women, 4% lower than the 2019 rate, a 19% decline since its 2007 peak, and the lowest rate officials started keeping back in 1909. Reports Live Science, which adds birth rates and births have been declining in number at about 2% per year since 2014. How about that? And you know what, guys? It was around 2014 and 2015, I started noticing these articles popping up about different countries in both Eastern and Western Europe, where pretty much governments were almost on their hands and knees begging their citizens to breed, to have kids, because they were seeing the decline in the birth rates, and they're making projections on the future in terms of what they need, more people, more taxpayers to obviously pay into their economic system, their socialist system. They need more and more people coming in to support people that are older and all that. And it's scaring the crap out of them. So they're offering everything, major tax deals and all these other incentives. And I was paying attention to that stuff even back then. And so now it's starting to be picking up at more of an alarming pace here in the United States. So I'll be very curious to see in the coming years if all these different deals will be offered to people like they are in Europe to get people to breed. It'll be interesting to see if that happens here. It goes on, teens in particular are experiencing a deep decline with a 63% drop since 2007. Well, teens shouldn't be having kids, in my opinion, at all anyway, so in my opinion, that's a good thing. Insider warns that this decline may be leading to a demographic time bomb, with older workers not being replaced quickly enough by the younger ones, which could negatively affect the economy overall. Well, you got more and more people living longer, and so when they retire, obviously to pay, for instance, here in the United States, Social Security and Medicare, they need more workers paying into that, because when you have more and more people that are retired and more people are going to be cashing in on that, they got to get the money somewhere, and they will. Mark my words, they will. Whether they're going to raise the retirement age, we'll see. Good luck with that one. That'll be popular. Or raising the taxes. Again, good luck with that one. That'll be popular. But something's going to happen. I don't think they're going to want to reduce the payments, but that will probably happen as well. So it's a big concern. Reuters notes that health officials aren't directly attributing the decline to the pandemic, with Live Science going so far as to say it wasn't likely that the pandemic played a big part, as most of the births in 2020 were babies conceived in 2019. The Times, however, calls the drop early evidence that the pandemic sped up the trend. Birth rates have historically taken a dive following times of turmoil, like after the Great Depression, and after significant events such as when Roe versus Wade was decided in the 1970s. Yeah, well, like I said, people are breeding like rabbits now, so I don't know what they're talking about. But those trends usually reverse, while after the Great Recession that began late 2007, the U.S. birth rate continued to drop. Gee, I wonder why. Maybe more and more people are waking up to realize it's not what it's cracked up to be. This points to something else going on. I wonder what that could be. The Times notes, a Johns Hopkins demographer thinks that something else involves women putting off having children until their later years. I'm feeling a little bit selfish, a 29-year-old hospital IT worker tells the paper, saying she and her friends have, for the most part, delayed becoming parents. We are all putting it off. Well, yes, more and more women are putting it off because, let's be honest here, thanks to many decades of the feminist movement telling women, go out there, you have careers and all that stuff, and you can, and Cosmopolitan magazine and other ones like that saying, hey, you don't have to do that in your 20s, wait till your 30s, guys will want you just as much in your 30s and 40s. Well, that's not so easy, and this goes to the next article I'm going to go into, talking about how the demographic of the women in their 30s and 40s are now having kids. But let me tell you something, guys, it's not so easy, because a lot of women, when they want to wait, they think they can wait to their 30s or even 40s to have kids. Well, it's not as easy to have children then. I believe 35 years old, maybe 33, technically is considered a high-risk pregnancy age at that point, so it's a lot harder. And a lot of women wait too much and think they're going to be just as attractive in their 30s or even 40s as they were in their 20s, and realize, guess what? It's not as easy for them to get guys like it was in their 20s. And of course, you got so many that are so unbelievably picky that they just waiting for that perfect guy, because again, that's what the Times have a condition of women to do, thanks to all the attention they get from dating apps, social media, all that. They wake up one day and they're in their late 30s or 40s and say, where are all the good men? There are no good men. I can't settle down, so I'm going to have to, basically have the artificial insemination or something like that. And it's happening. I know 2 women right now that are doing that, and they're in their 40s. Okay, it's not easy, and not to mention it's expensive as all hell. And these are women that obviously wanted to have families and husbands, but guess what? Didn't happen. But a lot of women that are good looking in their 20s, they passed up tons of great guys, thinking they deserved something better, and their sense of their value was very warped, to put it mildly. Then they get to their 30s and 40s. Guys either don't want to settle down, or they want somebody that's younger. And they say, where are all the good men? Well, you passed them all up. So now we're going to go into the other article. And this article is titled, Another Drop in Fertility Rate Suggests Deep Social Change. Births increase among women in their late 30s and 40s. So you see here, they're waiting longer. Okay? But it's not as easy as it's made out to be. It says the U.S., this is from 2019, by the way, so it's a couple of years ago, but pretty relevant because it's not that far away. says the U.S. fertility rate fell for a fourth year in a row in 2018 to the lowest level in about 3 decades. The 3.7 million births, 59.1% for every 1,000 women of childbearing age, was down 2% from 2017, and 15% from 2007, according to data out Wednesday. The total fertility rate, an estimate of the number of births group of 1,000 might have over their lives, also fell 2% to 1,729.5 births per CNN. NBC News reports that's shy of the 2,100 births needed for the population to remain stable. Births began to fall with the economic downturn in 2008, but despite a small but brief increase in 2014, they've continued to decline even as the economy has recovered. Per the New York Times, demographers are trying to figure out if this is a temporary phenomenon or a new normal, driven by deeper social change. Yes, it is a new normal because this was a couple years ago, and so it had been 4 years in a row, and the article I just did now shows it's now been 6 years in a row. And as the trend is going, it's going to get more and more. But they're saying they're going to get to the point where it says more women in their 30s and 40s are having them, and women are waiting longer. But like I said before, it's not so easy. A decline was seen across nearly all age groups, with the greatest drop in births among teens. They fell 7.4% from a year before. Only women in their late 30s and early 40s saw increases in birth rates, which may be driving a slight increase in births delivered at less than full term, per CNN data. Data showing more than half of women who had children in their late 30s had college degrees, compared to a smaller percentage of women who had children in their late 20s. Suggests that people want to establish themselves before having children. See? To make sure they have adequate resources. Allison Gimmel, a demographer at Johns Hopkins University, tells the Times, she says, childlessness is not a concern, as a typical woman will have 2 children by her mid-40s. Mid-40s? Immigration to the U.S. has so far offset declines in fertility. So that was a couple of years ago, and that's a quick article there, but the point is, more and more waiting until they get older, but it's not so easy. And again, you had the Sex and the City generation that grew up watching Carrie Bradshaw and her girlfriends on that HBO show, being fabulous in their 30s and not getting hitched, but then still looking for Mr. Right, or the perfect Mr. Right. They get to their 30s, and a lot of guys simply don't want to get married anymore nowadays because guess what? They realize it's not what it's cracked up to be. The deck is stacked against them. But yet these women in their 30s and 40s, where are all the good men? Because if the ones that do want to settle, they want somebody younger if they can get it. Meanwhile, these women had guaranteed plenty of opportunities in their 20s and even their early 30s of really good guys, but they weren't interested with it because they always wanted to get somebody better. And then when they get to the point where they're ready, because they've been career women and they've been Carrie Bradshaw and they've ridden the carousel for a couple decades, guys don't want to settle, or they're still picky. And they say, where are all the good men? And I know women like this, right? But the deal is, the dropping birth rates is because basically more and more young people are seeing it's not what's cracked up to be. So now I'm going to get into the final article, guys. And this one is going to talk about, obviously, the Generation Z and how simply young people just aren't interested anymore. And this is going to be the real thing to pay attention to of where things are going to go, because this generation, either they're not interested at all, or at the very least are waiting later in life to get married, and of course, as a byproduct, have kids. So this final article says, why traditional marriage is no longer appealing to younger people. Over the past few years, it's become more and more commonplace for millennials and Generation Z to put off and even entirely forego getting married. In 2011, Kate Bullock wrote the Atlantic cover story, All the Single Ladies, where she talked about how the institution of marriage is outdated and that it's time to embrace a new idea of what romance and family should look like. Bullock also talked about how it's time to acknowledge the end of traditional marriage. This, of course, sparked a national controversy and conversation. Then in 2014, comedian Sarah Silverman tweeted, why would I want the government involved in my love life? It's barbaric. Within the short span of 3 years, it became more acceptable to put off or even completely reject marriage. And this article, guys, is only like 5-6 weeks old, so this is relevant for the times. But you see what I'm talking about here? This is obviously talking about a few years ago, but now we're going to come into modern times. It says here, in 1960, the average marriage was 20 years old for women and 23 for men. Average age, guys. My mom used to talk about back in the day when my mom was born in 1945, so she was 15 years old in 1960. She said in the 60s it was quite common for people to graduate high school, and they were hitched within a year or two, just like what it's talking about here. Imagine that now. So this is a sharp contrast with today, with the average being 27 for women and 29 for men. This average is even higher for urban areas such as New York and Washington. One theory proposed by sociologist Eric Kleinsberg is that we are in a rough economic times and that people don't feel comfortable to committing to someone during hardships. So many millennials are drowning in debt, and marriage is definitely a big financial investment. This has become a main reason why young adults in their 20s do not feel ready to tie the knot. Yeah, that's what they're blaming, the economic impact. But again, nobody wants to talk about that. Guess what? People see the negative impact of it. This generation here of the millennials, but especially the Generation Z, more than any other group, has grown up with single-parent households and have probably experienced divorce and seen what it's like, or somebody in their family, whether it's their own parents, aunt and uncle, friends. I mean, if you guys, for you young guys watching, I'm sure it's impossible to not know somebody that's gone through it and seen what it's like. So they're like, screw this, I'd rather be on my own. I remember a few years ago, I was visiting my cousins, and at the time my nephew was probably 12 years old, and jokingly his parents brought up the subject that, oh, one day you'll have a wife, and his face got just dead serious. He said, I don't want a wife. I'm never going to have a wife. And I was a very proud uncle at that moment. This is long before I started doing this, but even then. And by the way, that was before his parents got divorced and had a nasty divorce, which he experienced, and I guarantee you, he's not going to forget that. That goes on. However, this issue does not magically disappear and can even keep millennials from taking the plunge well into their 30s. A Washington Post article by Gabriello Barco refers to James Fay, a 33-year-old who works in advertising, because both he and his ex-partner were focused on their careers. Neither made it to the I do. Still, despite never getting there with his previous partner, he says that marriage is definitely not off the table for him. Some, however, have chosen to never go that route. Holly Dobrinsky, who is 28 years old, says that being independently single means you're choosing happiness. Another reason why people are opting out of early marriage is that it's no longer a necessity to live in this society. It has become far more acceptable for women to be independent, and it's far more affordable to survive without assistance from a spouse now than ever before. And it goes both ways. Having children used to be a huge push for people to get married, but seeing as how contraceptives and abortions can delay childbearing for women, many feel that they have been liberated from the possibility of getting trapped into a marriage because of an unwanted pregnancy. Feminist women tend to put off marriage because the idea that marriage is a misogynistic institution. Some even goes so far as to say that marriage is sexist and is designed to oppress women, and as a result choose to stay unmarried. Well, there's a big surprise there, them saying that. Another theory comes from MBG contributor Tanisha White, who says that it is becoming more acceptable for couples to live together without ever getting married. This, of course, plays a large role in why so many no longer feel the need to legally tie the knot. According to an article posted on Bentley University's website, there's definitely some truth to this. Young couples are choosing to live together before marriage, and some choose to never even get married at all. Very different times, and they're waking up and realizing it's not worth it. And of course, what goes along with that is not having the kids. In fact, about a quarter of unmarried young adults between the ages of 25 to 34 are already living with long-term partners. The mentality surrounding this evasion of marriage is that a legal sheet of paper doesn't define a couple's relationship, and if they can already be together without it, there's no point. There's not much point in attempting to acquire it. Now, depending on where they live together too long, it can be considered a common law marriage. So that's something that obviously people got to pay attention to. And obviously it's different in different countries. I know in Canada, you live together 6 months, I believe, and you're considered a common law marriage. So you Canadian guys, watch out for that. Whatever the reason may be that young adults are choosing to put off or reject marriage, there are also many reasons why some still do choose to get married. A study done by NCBI suggests that those who get married between the ages of 22 and 25 have the highest chances of an intact marriage of the highest quality. Although they did not say that 22 to 25 is the ideal age range for everyone, a study does show that those who deliberately put off marriage do not actually gain anything from it. An article written by Margie Monin Dombrowski lists several reasons why getting married young is actually worth it. Some of these reasons include the fact that it can have a huge influence on your mental and even physical health. Well, for those that get married and young and it works out for them, great. But so many stories I do are the people that got married too young, without much experience and maturity, I might add, and it's a train wreck. So I always advise guys to be at least 30 years old and have a lot of experience before you even consider doing that. But that's just me. Young adults in their 20s who are married actually have lower rates of depression and excessive alcohol consumption as compared to their single, cohabiting peers. A great example why this might be comes from a 21-year-old Washington resident, Christina. She shares, "You get to make a lot of great memories with the same person. You get to experience so many different firsts with them. They're always there for you." Yes, that's nice and fine and dandy then, but what about in 15 years when you're bored? Something to keep in mind. This supports one theory that marriages may be happier when a spouse is the one and only rather than the one of many. Gee, what could they be referring to? Though some women opt to put off marriage due to independence and the availability of contraceptives and abortions, an article on Psychology Today suggests that casual sex has poor influence on one's mental health. Dr. Susan Krause, PhD, writes, research is examining the mental health associations of hookup sex also report that participants who were not depressed before showed more depressive symptoms and loneliness after engaging in casual sex. I've heard that theory too. Perhaps Christina was on the right track when she said that sharing first with one person was a great way to build a strong bond in her marriage. Well, there's many arguments on both sides of the thing, so that's going to be talked about another day. But anyhow, I'm going to wrap this up here because this article kind of goes on forever, but basically says, the institution of marriage may be dying down, but that's not 100% accurate. While the average age of marriage has gone up and the amount of people getting married has gone down, marriage is still a very strong part in many people's cultures. Still, a lot of people do get married, absolutely, but it is dropping big time. It's important to understand that the reasons behind why some people may choose to put off marriage or reject it entirely, but it's also important to remember that some people want to choose this milestone for themselves. A person's journey is their own, and what is right for some may not be right for others. But notice again, they didn't mention that it's been slowing down because basically guys are realizing it's not worth it, because that wouldn't be very popular now, would it? But we all know by the guys that follow me here, obviously, who've been through marriages and been through bad divorces, or know people that have, that things have changed. But simply talking about things and awareness and channels like mine and plenty of others, people talking about it. But in my opinion, what's been really going on impacting this behind the scenes is not the pandemic or economics. It's just simply guys just aren't interested. And there are also women out there that aren't interested. I know some. So, but anyhow, guys, just goes to show you. And I bet you next year they're going to see that this year was a declining rate. But it is making a lot of people nervous in terms of how things are going and affect the economy down the road. But it will be interesting to see. But it seems that as time goes on, more guys are being aware of this, and simply they're just opting out and say, nah, not for me. And at best, they're just doing casual relationships. That's about it. And they're happy being on their own with their dog, going fishing, doing whatever they enjoy, working on their goals, their purpose and all that. Whatever makes them happy. And I encourage you guys to do what makes you happy. So, all right, guys, that's it for today. I thought there'd be some interesting statistics that you would enjoy. Be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. And be sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe. And I'll catch you next time.